In the news business, Friday is typically where news is released by people who don't want it to be seen. But I don't think that's going to work out all that well for UFC lightweight champion Conor McGregor. Welcome, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas, and if you have not heard, Conor McGregor has made some news this Friday for actions related to his conduct at a Bellator event. So at the 3 Arena in Dublin, Ireland, there was Bellator 187. It was a bit of a co-promotion with Bama, but let's just focus on the Bellator side of things. Here's what went down. At Bellator 187, one of Conor McGregor's SBG teammates, Charlie Ward, by the way, a UFC veteran, was fighting there against a guy by the name of Johnny Redmond. Now, Charlie Ward won in the first round via KO. So here's what happens. McGregor just out of the stands, because by the way, he is not a licensed cornerman for this event. He just leaps into the cage to celebrate with his teammate. Well, the problem with that is, even if you were a licensed cornerman, you're only allowed to enter the cage at the referee's discretion. So that wouldn't help him. He jumps over and celebrates with Ward. Goddard goes to separate them and to ask him to leave. Now, Goddard does press his chest. You can even call it pushing him. It wasn't overly forceful, but it wasn't necessarily light either. He then goes to check on Redmond, who, by the way, has just been knocked out and is probably concussed. At this point, all kinds of people are trying to be in the cage, and there was someone else with Goddard originally when he tried to separate Ward and McGregor. But Goddard, who you know has history with Conor McGregor from Conor McGregor's actions related to the Artem Lobov bout versus Andre Fili, where he was yelling instructions from the outside, but neither here nor there for the moment. Goddard goes over to check on Redmond, and McGregor goes to follow him. He is sort of separated, but not very effectively, because then McGregor goes and shoves referee Marc Goddard, so much so that he shoves him actually into Redmond, who is kind of on his knees and dazed, and Redmond kind of just gets pushed over. He's obviously not doing all that well. Now, from there, he did actually leave the cage, but that wasn't the end of it. So then what happens is, I believe TMZ had footage of McGregor doing a bit of a lap around the cage once he exited it, and at that point, he goes up onto the cage apron and then kind of straddles the cage to still celebrate with Ward. A Bellator employee of some variety, I don't know exactly what they do, goes and tries to remove him. Now, the Bellator employee probably could have been a little bit more delicate about it, almost pushing him out of the, or off of the cage, I should say. McGregor slaps him. Open hand, clear as day, right on video, slaps him. So, then he ultimately leaves. Now this is basically under control after all that is over. Couple of things. Number one, security is typically a function of the arena. I don't know how it was that McGregor, who was essentially in this context, in terms of the regulations, no more than a fan, how he's able to get from his section all the way into the cage. You should know that as a media member, I can tell you that Bellator, I don't know if they had this set up for this one, but historically, they have often put the VIP section in front of media row. So you can have the 2 lines or 3 lines of media row, even 4, and they'll put VIPs in front of it. UFC commonly does not do that. In other words, they want to give as much access to VIPs at Bellator events, and in so doing, they don't have much of a barrier between themselves and actually entering the cage, and that could have contributed to what you saw here at Bellator 187. Now you can say, well, this isn't Bellator, who cares? Well, number one, they're the primary beneficiary of this. They were promoting Conor doing this in their cage, both online. They released the footage digitally. They have been touting it for subsequent television broadcasts, so they're kind of milking this for all it's worth. But you can say, well, it happened in Ireland. What difference does it make? It actually makes a bit of a difference. This was regulated by Mike Mazzulli of the Mohegan, well, not just by himself, but he is the head of the Mohegan Commission. You might know them from the Mohegan Sun Arena out in Uncasville, Connecticut. A respected gentleman and a respected commission, and Mazzulli is also the head of the Association of Boxing Commissions. So that creates a bit of a problem for McGregor. The issue is as follows. If he is handed a suspension of any kind, typically, even though the Mohegan Commission is not a state commission, it is a respected commission, and the other state commissions could very well reflexively adopt that suspension. So California could adopt it, New Jersey could adopt it, Nevada could adopt it, whoever they want could adopt it, so that anywhere he wanted to fight within the confines of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, he would likely be prevented from doing so. That could include, by the way, not just MMA, but boxing as well. And obviously that creates a bit of a problem because he is at least anticipated, though nothing had been confirmed, to be fighting maybe at UFC 219 at the end of this year. That would be December 30th in Las Vegas. So if Mazzulli and the Mohegan Commission do something about this, it is very possible that Nevada will honor it. And if they do, that means McGregor would be out for some time. Now the question is how long? You'll recall Jason High, after he lost to Rafael dos Anjos in New Mexico, he shoved a referee not even half as hard as anything McGregor did today. He not only was cut from the Ultimate Fighting Championship, he was suspended a year. Roy Nelson was suspended many months for almost a delicate push on Big John McCarthy for one of his bouts as well. These things can be a bit uneven. That's what the commission essentially wants to decide about the severity of the action. But you have to imagine on the scale of bad actions in the course of touching officiating, totally without merit, this is one of the worst ones I've seen in some time. It's not necessarily the all-time worst, but it's not great. Certainly you would think on the range of acceptable punishments or probable ones, I don't know that 9 months to a year is somehow out of the question. It just really depends on what these commissions want to do. Now, some have brought up the fact that we're talking about Conor McGregor. We're not talking about Roy Nelson. We're not talking about Jason High. Fair point. That is exactly correct. We are not talking about those gentlemen. This is going to be a bit of an interesting test for the officiating world and the regulatory world. What is it that they really intend to do about this? Because ultimately, this is way worse than anything Jason High did. Ultimately, this is way worse than anything Roy Nelson did. And they were not let off with insignificant punishments. What are they going to do about Conor McGregor, and how's that going to have an impact? Because, as it's been stated by many, this is sort of a test case to see how much bigger or not Conor McGregor is than the rest of the MMA world. If he gets a 2 or 3 month suspension, even that could be problematic because it would keep him off the 219 card. But okay, you could have him first quarter of next year. What if they give him a year? Again, if this was anybody not named Conor McGregor, you would think a year would be an easy minimum call that they would give him. No problem. But because it's him, that suspension might be reduced. And if so, who else is going to honor it if the Mohegan Commission lays it out? This is a bit of a test. How serious is the regulatory world about punishing popular fighters? Is this a world in which the rule of law either matters or it doesn't? We're going to find out. This is something to be noted for them. And I know some Conor McGregor fans have said, well, what about the mitigating circumstances? Look, we can have a debate about what kind of punishment there should be. We can have a debate about what kind of actions Conor needs to take in order to fix this scenario, but there's no denying he's completely in the wrong here. And we're not saying that this is a guy who is, broadly speaking, a terrible person. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, broadly speaking, his acts today were basically indefensible. I mean, look, if he were just a fan, not named Conor McGregor, just a regular, ordinary citizen, and he did what Conor had done, you put your hands on a referee, you slap a Bellator employee, you're going to jail. You're going to jail. There's no two ways about it. That's assault. And so for him to even do that is pretty brazen. I've seen folks saying, well, I've seen family members in the cage before. What's any different than a teammate going in? Well, a teammate is not a legal or regulatory designation. Either you're a licensed cornerman or you're not. Even if you are, you still can't jump in there. And especially if you're not, you can't do that. So the answer is, again, once the referee brings in the proper personnel to address the needs that the KO'd fighter has and everyone else, then everyone else can come in. All McGregor really had to do was wait about a minute or two, and they would have let him in. This would have been no issue at all. He just lost control. I don't know how else to say it. Bellator has issued a statement saying they're looking into the situation. We have not heard anything from UFC at this time, although you have to imagine they cannot be pleased about this, not least of which is that it jeopardizes McGregor's participation at UFC 219 and potentially beyond, but that it gives a boost to the television ratings and the profile of a competitor in Bellator. This we got all over SportsCenter's Twitter account. The Big Lead posted about it. A lot of mainstream sites posted about it. You can expect you're going to see this on a lot of mainstream media organs. It's a great, as I mentioned before, publicity win for Bellator. I cannot imagine the UFC is too happy about that, but of course, speaking in realistic terms, I don't think he's going to be cut for anything like this. I also don't think the UFC is going to really levy any kind of sanction. What they're worried about is what the commissions may or may not do. So we're going to see what happens here. This is somewhat uncharted territory insofar as, yes, we've seen fighters or other actors put their hands on the members of the officiating crew, and that has carried some certain kinds of punishment. We have seen people jump into cages for a variety of different circumstances, but we've never seen it like this, where maybe the most popular combat sports star alive and competing did it in a way that it could jeopardize his fighting future, promotes a rival, and really, to be honest, it took away from the nice win of Charlie Ward. He was on a 2-fight losing streak. He had a 500 record. He got back to business here. It was a solid win for him, and he did it in his hometown, and that's been completely overshadowed, much the same way that the Artem Lobov loss, but his participation anyway, and the Andre Fili fight was overshadowed by McGregor's actions as well. He has a way of being involved here, and I know he is passionate. I know he cares deeply for his team. He cares deeply for his sport. He cares deeply for his friends. And he cares deeply for his country. And no one can or should knock him for it. But there are rules. And the rules don't say everyone has to obey them except Conor McGregor. Everyone could do these things and not do these things except Conor McGregor. He is part and parcel of this just as we are. He has to acknowledge there are limits and parameters. And whether or not the regulatory bodies in play will enforce them, I guess we're going to find out. But not a great day for Conor McGregor. Not a great day, frankly, for Irish MMA in terms of perceptions among the larger casual sporting audience there. And not necessarily a great day for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. For more information, stay tuned to this YouTube channel as well as MMAfighting.com. Until next time, I'm Luke Thomas.